your hawk, get out your bib. Solid! Picking a rib. Out the east to a barbecue and start picking a rib. And he kept on picking. Good for them, good for me and you, so let's start picking too. Old Cole came out of a hole by picking a rib. Picking, picking. Smoked a hog on a red-hot log, called it a barbecue. Say, stomping chicken, we've got a new creation. Say, you better start picking, cause barbecue's taking the nation.
It's time for Pickin' and Flickin' in the Nostril Zone, where I pick a book off my shelf and flick through it. What else could that mean? I'm your host, cartoonist Kyle Bridget, and before we jump into it, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, be a ding-dong daddy, and ding that bell. Today we're looking at Masterpiece Comics, published by Drawn & Quarterly. Wait, who did this book? I don't think their name is on the cover, but it's R. Sikoryak. Here it is on the spine, R. Sikoryak. So, I was recently on Flippin' Through, which is a program, something like this one, but whereas we tend to flick through books, he flips through Mad magazines. So we were flipping through the most recent issue of Mad Magazine, and we came across an R. Sikoryak piece, and I mentioned Masterpiece Comics, and so, I thought maybe I would pick this off my shelf and give it a flick through now. So let's do that. And R. Sikoryak, I first encountered him in the early 2000s in Windsor, Ontario. And when I say encountered him, I don't just mean his comics, because I had actually encountered his comics years before, but he had come to Windsor, Ontario as part of like a lecture series. And he gave a lecture at a local gallery, and then he attended a comics jam, the Windsor Comics Jam, or at least what became the Windsor Comics Jam. He was kind of at the pilot version of the Windsor Comics Jam. And if you don't know what a comics jam is, it's pretty simple. Basically, you meet up in a location and you have a bunch of pages, and someone draws a panel on a page, and then someone else picks it up and adds a panel, and you just kind of fill up the pages. And often it descends into the more base areas of lewd crudeness, but it's a lot of fun. So R. Sikoryak was at the Windsor Comics Jam, and I got to draw with him, and he also signed my issue of Raw Magazine, and this is the only issue of Raw Magazine that I own. And so I had bought this in like the late 90s, maybe like 1995, and I still owned it in the early 2000s when he came to Windsor, and he signed it. And you'll see he actually drew a little character here saying, "Hi, Kyle." And we'll see this character later in the book that we're looking at today. But yeah, it was neat. So R. Sikoryak, he's a copier. He looks at classic artists and illustrators, mostly from the Golden Age, but some Silver Age too, but generally iconic cartoonists and cartoons. And he looks at it and copies it, and just kind of changes a little bit here and there in like the costuming and the setting, and he mimics it perfectly. And even when he was at that comics jam, he had like a sample of comics. He had brought like a Batman comic or something, and he actually was looking at that and drawing what he was seeing and kind of mimicking what was in the comic examples that he brought. It's a real specific skill, copying, and as we'll see, he uses it to great effect. Masterpiece Comics, it's a collection of comics that I believe have been printed elsewhere. One of them appeared in that Raw magazine from moments ago. He's got them all listed here. He's got them divided into sort of sections, and some of them have more than one. So, I mean, theoretically, maybe he released them as like a floppy comic book, but I don't think so, because they're all very short. And on the back here, he's got them displayed as if this was like a trade paperback. And what he does is take classic literature and present it humorously in the form of popular comics. So the Crypt of Bronte, you've got Hester's Little Pearl in the style of Little Lulu, Dostoevsky comics. So you get the idea, and this is a great selection of stories in here. The end pages here are quite nice, and you've got this table of contents. You can see I paid $12.50 for this book used, whereas originally it was, $24.95 in Canada, so about half price, and I think that's pretty standard for a used book when they're not trying to gouge you too much. And what do we have here in the data? So it says copyright 1989 to 2009 by R. Sikoryak. When was this printed? First printing 2009. This seems to be a first printing. I don't know if this has been reprinted, if there's been any subsequent printings of this. And on this page here is this thing that I like, X-Ray Pics, an amazing literary discovery. Scholarly optical principle really works. Imagine holding a comic book in front of you. Reading closely allows you to see beneath the juvenile four-color images to a world of deep emotional resonance and significant artistic merit. Look at all the friendly characters. Aren't they somehow tragic now? Loads of laughs and fun at cocktail parties. Glasses not required. And I just really think this is so nice. I think it's a great sentiment, and it's a sentiment that maybe needed to be said more in 2009 than now. I think, by now comics are, kind of widely seen as a legitimate literary art form. But I think even in 2009, comics were still very much bogged down in basically Silver Age superhero comics because of the Comics Code, which, said, yes, comics are only for kids. And the art form has been playing catch up, at least in North America, ever since. Although I think now it's a little bit more understood. Okay, so our first section is Classics on Parade. And this is taking on the style of the earliest Golden Age comic books. Famous Funnies is the famous one from before, when comic books were carrying original material and at first were just reprinting newspaper comic strips. And it says, featuring Blonde Eve and many other favorites from the ancient world to the Enlightenment. And he's got this Draw Homer fake ad. This is, of course, playing on these Draw Me ads that you would see in old comic books, like Famous Artist Talent Test or something like that. I like that he's incorporated the vintage comic book ads, this sort of ephemera of the ephemera, but he's turned it literary with Homer here. Okay, and to start with, we've got Blonde Eve, and Dagwood's boss is God here. He says, "Let there be light. Let there be a firmament in the waters. Let the waters below gather. Let dry land appear and bring forth seed. Let there be lights in heaven. Let the waters bring forth living creatures in abundance. Let the earth do the same. Good. Adam, I'm putting you in charge here. Dress and keep this garden. You may eat of every tree except the tree of good and evil. For the day you eat its fruit, you'll surely die." It's no good to leave him alone. I'll make him a helper. And he walks up to him while he's asleep here and saws him open and takes a rib. He says, "One will do the job." And, of course, that's how he makes woman in the form of Blonde Eve. And he says, "They're naked and they're not ashamed." And so it goes on from there. You get the picture. It's telling the first few chapters of Genesis here, the Adam and Eve creation story, using Chick Young's Blondie comic. I think came out in like 1930. It's got it all here. The serpent's there. He looks like their dog. And, they eat from the apple and God makes them clothes. It's like their regular comic clothes as it sends them off home. And that's pretty much it. Next we get Inferno Joe, which is Dantes Inferno told using Bazooka Joe Comics. And I've always thought this was a very clever choice because, of course, Dante's Inferno is famously illustrated by Gustave Doré, who is, very much not the sort of naive, simple style of Bazooka Joe. I mean, you look at this and, it's a very serious, 19th century engravings, perfect anatomy, very classically illustrated, very kind of influential, almost holy book. Then it's contrasted by being told in the most crass, commercial, disposable, lowest common denominator comic that you can imagine. The free comic you get with a piece of bubble gum. It's an inherently funny contrast, I think. And he's got this, the wrapper going down the one side of the comic, which gives it a nice kind of industrial feel. And it starts off, "Help, I'm lost in this dark wood." This guy comes along and says, "Don't worry, Joe, I'll lead you to safety." "Great, where are we going?" "To hell." And this character is the character that our Sikoryak drew in my issue of Raw. What's his name? I don't know my Bazooka Joe characters. It's Mort. It's Mort. So this character's Mort. And you can see that it's not presented in exactly the same way. It's just black and white and red here with the gray background. He doesn't have the same wrapper down the side. He just has this bar here, probably to make it fit the different formats. And the presentation is kind of staggered here. It's kind of jumbled, because this one is much more structured in this grid layout. And here is my drawing of Mort that our Sikoryak did in my issue of Raw. And so basically the way he's adapted this is after the first comic, each little strip is a circle of hell. So here in the fourth circle, greed, he's got these guys that are running each other with rocks, and he says, "Why didn't you hoard? Why didn't you waste?" And Joe sticks his head in and says, "Excuse me, why didn't you repent?" The fifth circle's pretty good. It's wrath, and they're crossing the river Styx. And Joe says, "Hey, there's a bully I know." Mort says, "Where?" He says, "Right here." Pow! Bops him right in the face. Down here, he's got some devils. This is in the, what's this? This is Deceivers. This is the eighth circle of hell. And this devil character's saying, "We'll dunk these souls in boiling pitch for all time. It's kind of gruesome. But hell, it's a living." The Flintstones ending. And, he's even captured the fortunes here. Beware of Greek gorgons bearing serpents. And the prize is there. He's done a really good job of capturing the feel and the sort of different elements of Bazooka Joe comics. And in fact, I was actually really inspired by this to do a Bazooka Joe style comic for a client that's a brewery, Good Robot Brewing, and they needed a little instruction propaganda thing to explain how to take care of your growlers, which is like a jug that you fill up with beer and you have to clean and dispose of the cap and stuff. So this was a good guideline for me when I did that project. Next, we have Mephistofield, or Mephistofield. This is where Dr. Faustus sells his soul to the devil being Mephistofield or Mephistofield. Here you can see him messing around with the Pope. Good stuff. Of course, in the end, the devil gets his due, and he's yelling, "Mephistofield!" or "Mephistofield!" And Mephistofield is saying, "I love my work." Then we have Macworth, which is Macbeth told using Mary Worth, and he signed it R. Sikoryak and Shakespeare. Merryworth, this is not a comic strip I have any memory of reading. I do remember seeing it on the rare occasion, so I don't know which newspaper it was in, but I suspect it was in the more conservative newspapers, and so I must have had like a grandparent or someone that had a newspaper subscription that carried Merryworth, but I never read it, and I never really had an interest in reading it, at least not when I was reading newspaper comics when I was a kid. Then we get Diggy, based on Candide by Voltaire and R. Sikoryak. And up here we have old Pangloss saying, "All is for the best in this, the best of all possible worlds." And this one's presented in an interesting way where you get that really simplistic, naive, Ziggy style. But he's walking through this world of, almost like 19th century etchings of just like, horrific misery and injustice and debauchery. And it ends with Diggy planting a flower saying, "All I know is we must cultivate our garden." A fairly succinct but apt retelling of Candide. Of course, it's not as long as the Divine Comedy, which he told in Bazooka Joi Comics, so maybe not as impressive an accomplishment. Then we have the Crypt of Bronte. So down the side, we've got these horror mascots recreated here. The housekeeper is a crypt keeper. The governess is the old witch, and the tenant is the vault keeper. This is, of course, done in the style of, EC Comics, Tales from the Crypt. Unfortunately, I don't actually own any Tales from the Crypt reprintings. It's kind of a blind spot in my collection, but I do have some crime suspense stories, which are very similar in style. And you can see he's really captured the style of these comics. This is a Johnny Craig. He's even got the EC logo reversed here as classic entertainment. He's done a really good job with it. And this is a nice detail here. He's even aping Johnny Craig's signature here. He's signed R. Sikoryak in a similar style to Johnny Craig. And so the Heights, so this is Withering Heights, Emily Bronte, told in the style of EC Comics, Tales from the Crypt, the Johnny Craig Tales from the Crypt. And this is why I think this is such a great book for fans of these old comics, because it does a really good job of recreating these old comics. And, and also the stories are fun and they reveal something about the text. And you can see, let's see what we got here. Maybe I have a Johnny Craig story in here. This is pretty good. Let me just see if I have a better page. No, I think that other page was probably better. So you can see here that he's used like the same like lettering system. So he has the exact same lettering as the narration. He does this thing where it's like the yellow and the pink narration boxes. The colors of characters when they're in the foreground, they're kind of this purple. He's just done such a great job. And so not only is it revealing things about the literary text that it's retelling, and sort of conveying that story in an interesting way and kind of, pointing out some of the foibles maybe, but it's also revealing something about the comic genre that it's spoofing and, some of the oddities and eccentricities of that. So yeah, if you love classic literature, if you love old comics, you're going to love Robert Sikoryak's masterpiece comics. And I mean, I don't need to tell you, this art obviously sells itself. Okay, then we get Little Pearl. This is the Scarlet Letter, told using Little Lulu Comics. You can see here that he's really captured the style. This is a Tubby, but he was a Little Lulu character. It's basically the same comic. And here's Tubby right here. And he's even got the Puritan beard is actually tied on like a costume. And that's actually really clever because in the Little Lulu comic, there was like a recurring gag where Tubby would sort of dress up in a disguise and solve a mystery. Johnny Ryan spoofed this really funny with Tubby dressing up like a giant ball bag. This is a little more classy here. And I'm flicking through these really quick here because I think we're running a little short on time here. But he really does, and I keep saying this, but he does such a great job of recreating the style of these old comics. Here, if we look, it looks exactly like a little Lulu comic. Maybe there's a better page here. That was probably actually the best page. But, you know, the way that he's sort of captured these really simple, clean lines, the really basic perspective. All the characters look exactly like their counterpart. You know, it's perfect. It looks like a reprinted little Lulu comic that's just been recolored. And it's just done so well. I can't stress it enough. I'm always impressed when I pick up this book. Great stuff. Okay, then we've got Dostoevsky Comics. This is Crime and Punishment, very much in the style of like an early Silver Age Batman comic. He's even got the Comics Code Authority seal. It says approved by the Classics Code Authority. And this is Rascal. So he kills his awful landlord with an axe, and you can see she's depicted like the Joker. Then, of course, he has to live with his crime, and he's haunted by it. And this panel here is just like this. This is like, she's such an awesome Joker panel. Just even looks like a playing card almost. The dying drunk's daughter is even depicted as Robin here, which this is kind of a queer coded one with all of the gender swapping going on. Okay, masterful funnies. First, we've got Little Dory in Pictureland. And this is playing on the early 20th century Platinum Age newspaper comic by Winsor McCay, Little Nemo. And I do have one Little Nemo collection here. You can get some really nice Little Nemo collections. Like basically as much as you want to spend, you can get as big a book as you've ever seen of Little Nemo. There's a lot of them. I've just got this one little book, and I'm not sure if there's a great example in here to compare, but if we just, take this page and look, you can kind of see where he's captured the style again, and he's done a good job. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. My wife came home, and my camera shut off while I was paused. Let's kind of rush through this here. So you've got a portrait of Dorian Gray, the Oscar Wilde story told using Winsor McCay's Little Nemo. Again, he's done a good job of capturing the style of the original comic with the lettering and the rounded corners and even numbering the panels. And this is something that Little Nemo would do a lot, repeating an element in the same composition in each panel, which works really well for this story because you get to see step by step the portrait become increasingly depraved and grotesque as Dorian Gray doesn't age or die, until we get to the point at the end here where he's this impossibly fat, bloody piece of shit ripping out of his clothes, even breaking the edges of the picture frame. And Dorian Gray is just so disgusted that he slices at the painting and sort of becomes what he's looked like this entire time on the inside, which, of course, is the story of the picture of Dorian Gray. So kudos to Sikoryak on this one. All right, here's another good one. Good old Gregor Brown. So now he's doing Kafka. Metamorphosis, I believe this is from. And Gregor Brown, he wakes up one morning only to find himself to be some sort of hideous cockroach creature. And he just kind of disgusts his own family, and everyone hates him because of it. He's just such an imposition. He's just kind of crawling the walls and driving everyone crazy with disgust and stress. They have to pick up the slack, and eventually he dies. And it's a very Kafka-esque story, literally Kafka-esque. Then we have Action Camus. Camus the Stranger. And I like that this one is not only told through like Action Comics, Superman comics, but just the covers, which is, kind of a fun way to do it. And of course, Superman is kind of an ironic character to play the stranger. And so it's like on this issue his mother died and he's like indifferent, and then here the romance of Miss Marie. Do you love me? Well, it's a meaningless question, but I suppose not. This is a decidedly un-Superman-like scene, and Miss Marie saying, aren't you at least gonna call for help? And the stranger just says, I don't like cops. And you hear, crash, thud, wham. God, don't miss a walk on the beach. Blam, blam, blam. So much for the harmony of the day. So he kills this Arab guy, and he's in prison, and he says, in No Way Out, he says, I guess I can get used to anything. Then the stranger faces his most dangerous foe, the prosecutor. Gentlemen, it is without qualm that I ask you to impose the death penalty upon this soulless inhuman monster. And he's a little fazed by that one. So the chaplain pays a visit. I will pray for you, my son. Don't waste your lousy prayers. You're just as condemned as me. And as he's walking to the guillotine here, at last the stranger's execution day, he's looking around. He's saying, an indestructible guillotine, a huge hateful crowd. It's all I hoped for. Good stuff. This is my favorite panel. Well, it's a meaningless question, but I suppose not. And this is kind of the odd one out here. Go-Go and Die-Die in Waiting to Go, which is Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, done in the style of Beavis and Butthead, which, that was a show, not really a comic. I mean, there probably was a comic put out at some point after the show came out, but clearly this is based on the show. And I like how he's got this character. I can't remember his name, but he was like a proto Hank Hill, and he's walking the effete, progressive hippie teacher on a leash. And this guy on the show would always be like, oh, they're always whacking in my tool shed. And the teacher would be like, that's good, butthead. Art's a great way to express your emotions. I don't have a really good impression for him, but it's just funny characters to use. And at the end, we get a kind of bio on R. Sikoryak here. He's got a portrait of himself like Shakespeare. It says, R. Sikoryak has drawn cartoons for numerous media giants, including Nickelodeon Magazine, The New Yorker, and The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, as well as for independent publications, films, and theater productions. His cartoon slideshow series, Carousel, that might have been what I saw, has been presented around the U.S. and Canada. He also teaches and lectures on comics and illustration. Sikoryak lives in New York City with his wife and frequent collaborator, Creota Wilberg. Something that isn't mentioned here, probably because it hadn't happened when this was published, but he was also in SpongeBob comics for a while, of all places, which I think was put out by Bongo Comics. And he would do SpongeBob stories, but in the style of different comic artists, including one in the style of Fletcher Hanks, which is really obscure shit for a ostensibly a kid's comic, but it was good. I used to read it when I worked on a newsstand. And that's our Sikoryak Masterpiece Comics. Whew. This is a good one. R. Sikoryak, he's put out a bunch of books since. This is the only one that I own, but I know he's done Constitution comics where he illustrated the Constitution using different styles of, classic comics and illustration. He did one that was illustrating the terms and conditions of iTunes, and he did one that was all Trump stuff. That might have been the Constitution comics one. I can't really remember. I've seen them and I've thumbed through them, but I can't imagine that they're anywhere near as good as this, which is like, this has got to be the best Sikoryak collection to get. It's just so much fun. It's funny. It's got all the greatest hits of literature and comics. And, like I said, it reveals something about the literary works, and it reveals something about the comics, which are a different kind of literary work. Maybe a less literary work. And I really love this book. What do I give it for a rating? I think I'm going to give it 4 nostrils. It is really wonderful, and it's a lot of fun to read. I've had it for years. I pull it off my shelf often and read it, and I always find myself laughing. Sometimes even if I just need a quick overview of a work of classic literature, it actually does kind of work for that. But, it is a collection of shorter comics, so it doesn't quite have the impact of maybe of some of the serious literary works that it's relating. It doesn't quite have that overall oomph, but again, it is a great book and it's a lot of fun. Another drawback is that it's slightly too big. Not in length, it's a perfect length, but it's just the dimensions are a little too large. Yeah, so you can see this is a regular book. This is a slightly too big book. And it's probably the right choice making it this size given the artwork and the density of some of the stories in here. It definitely gives the art some room to breathe and it looks great. But it does make storing it a slight challenge. You've got really big books like this book here, Someday Funnies, which is ridiculously large. Look, I can just barely fit it on the screen if I turn it sideways. But, you buy a book like this and you expect to have to make accommodations to shelve it somehow. But this book, it's just slightly too big, and I have to store it down here with my larger books, which is premium real estate. If it was just slightly shorter, I could store it on one of my regular shelves. It would give me a lot more options instead of taking up some priority shelving. But I'm griping at this point though. So yeah, it's 4 nostrils, but it's a strong 4 nostrils, almost 4.5 nostrils. It's definitely comes highly recommended from me. So that's all for today, Nostril Heads. You can check out the Patreon, where you get early, uncensored access to all of my videos, including Canonically Crumb, where I explore the comics and characters of R. Crumb's Crummy-verse. As well, you'll be thanked at the end of the videos, and if you don't care about that, well, you can just flick off.
Smoke your hog, get out your bed, solid, picking a rib.